Simon, having fallen asleep at the machine desk, heard the sound of the computer in his dreams as it continued. It was now on C, having gone on through the night. It was going slightly faster. Some adjustments were made to the machine, mainly the printer being connected, and some additional wiring connecting the other new parts delivered the previous night.
Carbon, carcinogen, card, care, career, careful, careless, carpenter, carpet, carrot, carry, carry on, case, cash, cashier, cast, castle, cat.
The machine placed particular emphasis on the word cat, causing Simon to see the vivid image of a black cat with green eyes staring at him before hissing and scratching. He woke up fast, feeling pain in his eyeball from the image of the cat scratching him. He looked at the computer and adjusted his glasses. It continued its verbal testing of words beginning with C. Simon pressed a button to check the time on one of the other monitors. 5:14 in the morning. He was speechless, impressed that the computer was already on the third letter. He stood up, still staring at the screen, realizing something was missing. He looked down at the printer and pressed a button, successfully activating it with no issue. He looked at the monitors one last time before going upstairs. Simon entered the dining room and approached the portrait of Delilah on the fireplace mantel. He took it in his hand and looked at it for a moment, becoming emotional. He gently stroked his finger along Delilah's face, seeing a few flashes of it smashed open, causing him to twitch and throw up in his mouth. He swallowed and did a double take, managing to see Delilah for the beautiful woman she was before the accident. After rushing back down the stairs as the computer continued to go through C, Simon sat down, took the picture out of the frame, and held it to the printer. He hesitated for a moment. He looked up at the blank monitor and smiled before shoving the photograph into the printer. The computer stopped. It processed the photograph and began a visual process on the main monitor. It began to render something. Simon watched in anticipation, holding his clenched fists to his mouth as he stared intently like a child watching a puppet show. Within a flash, the computer successfully rendered a hyper-realistic recreation of Delilah's expressionless face on the main monitor. It opened its eyes and made various expressions as if it was stretching its facial muscles. Once it had fully settled, it continued to go through its C's, with Delilah's face moving its mouth to match the words. The computer now had a clear, almost human identity. Simon began to breathe heavily. He took a seat, lowered his head into his hands, and cried to himself in a mixture of joy and sadness. His crying turned into laughter, which then turned into dry heaving. Simon calmed down, no longer feeling alone, as he smiled at his creation like he'd known it his whole life.
Later in the afternoon, Frank was at his desk going through some paperwork. He was grumpy and annoyed, having had a long day of countless small problems he was dealing with simultaneously, including the many things relating to Simon Morgan. There was a knock at the door and Frank waited a whole 7 seconds before telling the person to come in. Todd entered, looking as suspicious and unusual as ever. "Todd Gilbertson," said Frank. "What do you want?" "Nothing more than a nice chat, Frank," said Todd as he closed the office door. "I mean, Professor Doherty." "I told you to keep your scrawny ass away from here unless you had good news for me, so I really, really hope you do." "It's ready for your viewing, Professor Doherty." "What is?" "Dr. Morgan's invention, sir." Frank widened his eyes and looked up at Todd's creepy smile. He was still disgruntled, but with an apparent curiosity. "How ready is it?" he said. "Very nearly almost, Professor Doherty," said Todd. "He wishes to show you his final test and fully complete it in front of your eyes." "He wants me to go up there and see him finish it." "Yes, Professor Doherty. And we're talking about the same Dr. Morgan, right? The one and only himself, Frank! I mean, Professor Doherty. Frank thought to himself quietly for a moment. He looked back up at Todd. He agreed and asked when. Tomorrow night, sir, said Todd. God, it's a little short notice, said Frank. I wasn't meant to have it done until the weekend, and I'm supposed to be going out to dinner with my kids tomorrow night. If I'd known a little more in advance, I could have worked around it. All necessary sacrifices one has to make, Professor Doherty. All right. What time? 8 o'clock sharp, not a minute late. Frank sighed and agreed before telling Todd to get out. Todd obliged, but not before assuring Frank that he was in for the biggest treat of his life. Todd finally exited the office, very slowly closing the door as he did so. Off-put by the young man's strange mannerisms and odd voice, Frank shook his head and sighed before resuming his paperwork, although he could scarcely even attempt to take his mind off of the news. Todd walked along the hallway. Concurrently, 2 female students walked past in his direction, clutching their textbooks to their chests. Todd looked at them with his creepy smile and nodded as they walked past. Clearly disgusted by him, the girls whispered to each other and giggled. Todd snickered as he continued to walk, believing that they had some kind of secretive crush on him. Jorge suddenly ran out from around a corner, clutching some papers under his arm. He saw Todd, who looked back at Jorge with intensity. Jorge ignored Todd and his odd smile, however, angering him and prompting him to march on in a huff. I hope you'll appreciate Dr. Morgan a little more when he returns to work, Professor Flores, Todd barked patronisingly. Jorge stopped, Todd's comment sticking with him. He turned around, but Todd had already barged through the stairwell doors and was well on his way. Jorge thought to himself for a moment, before brushing it off and pressing on to his next class. Sunset at the Morgan home. The gate opened and Uncle's truck pulled in outside the garage. Before exiting the vehicle, Todd assured his uncle that he wouldn't need to wait around and he'd return home in a few days' time. Uncle nodded. Simon opened the front doors, looking far less dishevelled and more well put together than before. Todd smiled and jumped out of the truck. Uncle reversed down the driveway and through the gate as it began to close. As Simon walked back into his house, Todd followed and closed the front doors. I have much to do before Frank gets here, said Simon. I need you to stay up here and stay out of trouble until he arrives. Don't let anyone except him in. Simon approached the cellar door and pulled out his key. Todd continued to follow close behind. Simon stopped and reminded Todd not to let Frank leave if things went awry. Before he could finish asking Todd if he had his safety tool on him, Todd brought out a taser and zapped 3 times to demonstrate. Good, said Simon. Simon unlocked the cellar and entered, firmly slamming the door behind him, leaving Todd to enjoy the house alone. He had a sneaky look around like a curious meerkat before entering the kitchen. Taking a further look around, the spider-like man spotted the bottles of alcohol on the counter, jogging over and grabbing one of the brandies. He dug through the cupboards to find a glass, pulled out one of Simon's basic water glasses, and poured himself a quintuple brandy. He slammed the bottle down and gulped the brandy like water with minimal effort, immediately topping up afterwards. In the cellar, Simon approached the desk with scientific equipment and chemicals on it. He continued experimenting by combining the chemicals with each other,
successfully creating a bright green liquid in an Erlenmeyer flask.
It started to glow and create a mist. Simon stared at it and smiled.
The face of Delilah on the monitor finished its Zs while staring with a blank face.
A faint curiosity was hidden within its computerized eyes as the machine speculated on Simon's progress. Later that night, Frank pressed the buzzer on the pad next to the front doors outside. He waited for a moment and looked around the property. He sighed after waiting longer than he was happy with and pressed the buzzer again. Still no answer. He went to buzz a third time, but was instead startled by Todd swinging the door open to greet him with an empty glass in his hand, clearly inebriated. "Oh, for God's sake, Gilbertson!" Frank barked.
"Ah, Frank!"
said Todd.
"Oh, I'm sorry, I can't call you that. Professor Doherty, at your service."
"Where's Morgan?"
"Shh. He's in the secret place. Come, please. I'll show you."
Todd clumsily walked towards the main hallway. Frank was beyond annoyed, but followed, slamming the front door shut. Todd led Frank towards the cellar door and stood by it. He held his arms out towards the door as if presenting it to Frank like a trophy. Frank waved his arms and slapped his hands against his thighs. "What?" he asked in an irritated manner.
"This is where the magic of scientific discovery happens,"
said Todd.
He knocked on the door 4 times.
The two of them waited, Frank irritable and Todd excited, eventually hearing heavy footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. The door opened, and Simon revealed himself. A smirk crawled along Todd's face. "Simon?" said Frank with a single nod. "Frank," said Simon before turning to Todd. "What's the matter with you?"
"Oh, nothing, sir," said Todd. "I'm just excited for Professor Doherty to..."
Without warning,
Simon grabbed Todd by the collar and yanked him closer.
he smelled Todd's breath and shoved the spiderish man away so hard he stumbled backwards and almost fell over. "You're drunk!" Simon snapped.
"I apologise, Dr. Morgan,"
said Todd in a weak and timid voice. He was on the verge of tears.
"Do forgive me. I won't do it again, I promise."
"Go and sit yourself down in the lounge with a glass of water. Sober up!"
Yes, sir."
Todd ran into the kitchen. Frank was utterly bewildered. "This better be good, Morgan," he said. "If you'd follow me..." "Doherty," said Simon. Frank glared at Simon, who stood back and held his arm out, so Frank made his way down the steps, into the cellar. Todd dug through the cupboard to grab an appropriate water glass, causing some other glasses to fall out, smashing onto the counter and the ground. He pulled out a tall glass, poured himself some water out the tap, and gulped it down.
"Need more,"
said Todd.
"Maybe just a touch of brandy. Make it rich."
Todd sped over to the alcohol on the counter and poured himself a large Archambault XQ. He took the glass to the sink and filled it with tap water. He gulped the concoction down, clearly disgusted by the flavour of watered-down cognac. He threw up in his mouth and took a seat at the table. In the cellar, Frank looked around at the result of Simon's hermit-like work. He was particularly frazzled by the sight of the computerized face of Delilah on the main monitor, still with a blank expression. What is this, Simon?" he said. "It's a human computer," said Simon. "Well, it's almost there. With some minor adjustments you will soon witness. It will be a reborn woman. Within a year, or even just a few months, it can be a creature without imperfection." "What the hell are you talking about?" "It has a mind, Frank. Look." Frank looked at the brain and spinal columns in the jar where Simon was pointing. He looked back at Simon. "It now knows the entire dictionary," said Simon. "Abandoned to oxymoron all the way to zealot. A to Z. Isn't it all the way to is it not? Impressive, no?" "What about zoo?" asked Frank with a tinge of sarcasm. "That too. I just prefer the word zealot, so I wanted to say it. sounds better. A complete understanding of the English language. An understanding of what it means to feel. Now all it needs is her. You mean Delilah? I mean everything. Her emotions, her memories, everything she needs to be Delilah again. It's all in this machine. I just need to finish processing it.
What the hell are you talking about?
How can you just... You can't just turn a computer into a dead woman! It isn't possible! Simon's glee disappeared. His look became cold to the point Frank felt goosebumps crawl along his arms. The hairs on the back of his neck raised. Allow me to explain, said Simon. I doubt your feeble mind will be able to comprehend it, but I'll try. He walked over to the computer and proudly rested his hand against the desk. All brain input is electrical stimulation, yes? I calculated the required stimulus and electrical charge inducer to generate an appropriate signal on the appropriate nerve. The brain was damaged, but I made it work. I didn't need artificial intelligence or anything like that. Just some stitch work, stem cells, and repairing the damage done to the arteries. The input goes directly to the brainstem and the top section of the spinal columns. Frank was still flabbergasted. Simon rolled his eyes and sighed deeply. The brain can process the electricity and code the same way we do to create emotion, Simon continued. That way the computer can output the same way that Delilah's body did before she died. But this is only phase 2. Phase 1 was building the thing, phase 2 is giving it life, and phase 3 is the most important and fundamental part of this. What kind of experiment is this? Said Frank. It's not an experiment, Frank.
This is the key to immortality.
It just needs one more kick before I press this button to phase 3. Simon walked over to the main desk.
He took the Erlenmeyer flask in one hand
and a syringe in the other. He extracted some of the liquid and set the flask down. He turned to face Frank, holding the syringe up next to his face. Frank was scared, moving back a few inches. Simon approached the computer, crouched down and shoved the needle into a minuscule hole in the brain jar. He injected the liquid into it and stood up. As the liquids in the jar combined, the face on the monitor began to twitch. Simon approached the keyboard and pressed the enter button. The face closed its eyes and lifted up a little, making expressions as if it was having an orgasm. The little lights winked and the switches flicked themselves back and forth. The polygraph machine linked to the computer began printing out with the needle scribbling rapidly.
What the hell is going on? Said Frank. Just a chemical boost to the brain to go along with the processing, said Simon as he watched in awe of his own work.
She's coming back to me. To us. She can feel! Simon threw the needle onto the desk and opened a compartment exposing a human heart connected to the computer's core with
flesh, tissue, and wires.
It was beating fast. Frank was shocked. He didn't know what to think, say, or do, as everything he had taught himself to believe about human nature and technology completely threw itself out the window. Her heart beats stronger than ever, said Simon. Jesus, Frank muttered under his breath. Simon closed the compartment and opened another one, showing some circuitry with blank flesh attached to it. Blank flesh isn't too dissimilar to stem cells, he said. You can adapt it to whatever purpose you'd like. In this instance, I've used it to give her a stronger sense of feeling. She can feel more human than ever. The machine began to moan and make uncomfortable noises. Simon took a seat and typed things on the keyboard. It calmed down a little but remained in discomfort. The flashing lights slowed down. Simon activated a nearby heart monitor, showing the machine's heart rate gradually slowing down. She just needs a moment, he said. Just as suddenly as a balloon popping, Delilah began to scream and wail in agonizing pain. The heart rate sped up to 138 beats per minute. The lights flashed quickly, the switches flicked back and forth constantly, the polygraph sped up to supersonic levels, and some of the other machines turned themselves on and went insane. The light bulbs in the cellar began to flicker. The screams became so intense that Simon and Frank covered their ears. Up in the lounge, Todd nervously sat on the edge of the couch, shaking his knees and slapping his thighs. You could hear the screams of a dead woman coming from the cellar, causing him to freak out. The lights in the lounge started flickering. Todd looked up at them, becoming more scared with every passing second. Back in the cellar, the suffering carried on as Delilah continued to scream, causing the other machines in the room to become hysterical. Glass on the desk began to crack and eventually explode, causing chemicals to go everywhere. "Turn it off!" Frank cried. As Simon attempted to reach the power button, Delilah stopped screaming.
No!
She cried. An electrical charge zapped Simon's finger, causing him to recoil as his hand suffered extreme pain. A siren started blaring. "Turn it off!" screamed Frank. "I can't!" Simon yelled.
You killed me!
Screamed Delilah.
Don't turn me off! Don't turn my power off or you'll kill me again!
I won't! Simon, destroy it!
Frank barked.
What? Destroy it now! I won't!
Simon stood closer to the computer, suspecting Frank would lunge after it to destroy it himself. Frank desperately looked around and saw a dusty mallet in the corner. He went and grabbed it before dashing towards the machine. Simon got into a scuffle with Frank that resulted in Simon being thrown aside, landing in a pool of chemicals and shattered glass. Frank went to smash the computer.
Stay away!
It cried.
Frank, please!
Simon yelled. Frank raised the mallet above his head and swung it down. Instead of hitting the computer, the mallet was stopped just an inch away by an electrical surge blasting into it. The intense shock spread throughout the metal handle and overwhelmed Frank's body, causing him to violently convulse and collapse. Delilah quieted down but remained frantic, with the face on the main monitor glitching. The face's piercing eyes stared at Simon and he stared back in wonderment. "She lives," he said.
She lives. She is alive! She's alive! She's alive! She's alive!
Simon waddled over to the machine. When he heard a faint electrical humming quiet down, he felt comfortable getting closer and grabbing the microphone. "Delilah," he said. "Delilah, sweetheart, can you hear me?"
Yes,
she said.
I don't need you to speak into the microphone. I can hear you.
"Oh, sorry."
It's you, Simon. It's your voice. I hear it in my head every day. I hear you. Your voice. I hear it. I hear your voice. I hear pain. I feel pain. I feel nothing but pain. I feel anger. I feel fear. I'm cold. I'm so cold.
It's all perfectly normal, my love. I promise you, it's all perfectly normal. Your brain is just readjusting.
What am I? What has happened to me? Why am I so cold? Why do I feel like this?
It all makes sense soon, lovely.
I hear it. The bike. I feel my face, I feel strange. I can taste blood and metal.
You can taste? Frank began to moan as he regained consciousness. Simon immediately turned his attention to him, which prompted Delilah's face to bat an angry eye out of jealousy as she instantly lost her husband's attention. Frank groaned as Simon tried to help him. Frank held a hand to his chest and stretched his arm, now finding it difficult to move. Well? Said Simon.
Get the hell away from me!
Yelled Frank as he shoved Simon away.
You're insane! Insane! What have you done? I've created life! I've reanimated the undead! I've restored my wife! I just need some time to stabilise the personality. It's clearly in a traumatic state, but then we can begin phase 3
No. I want that thing destroyed! What?
This is a dangerous machine. It is not stable! That dangerous machine is my wife! It won't be a machine for long. We can give it a body and truly resurrect her! This will change the course of medical history! Technological history! This is a miracle! That is no miracle, that is an abomination! You're talking about combining a Frankenstein-esque catastrophe with technological advancement, and that is nothing other than stupid and dangerous! You're playing God, and I don't like it! This isn't just my work, it's my life!
Simon yelled.
My happiness! And what about Delilah's? That isn't Delilah, it's mere remnants of her! You have to let go, Simon! End this! Pull the plug! No! You think I'm mad? You're the one talking about killing her a second time and preventing life-saving science! This is over! I've been stupid enough to supply something I knew nothing about, and now I'm stopping it!
Frank marched up the cellar steps towards the exit. He was walking funny as a result of nerve damage, still struggling to use his arm properly as he moaned nauseously. Simon chased after him. Delilah was staring intently with psychopathic eyes the entire time, her screen still glitching. Simon pleaded with Frank, telling him he couldn't bear to kill his own wife a second time.
Believe me, she's already been killed!
Frank barked.
You'd simply be showing mercy by stopping the misery you prepared to put her through all over again!
Frank opened the cellar door and was greeted by the taser being shoved directly into his already weakened heart. Simon stopped running up the steps and looked in shock as Frank flailed back into the wall, turning to Simon as he tried to stop himself from falling. He failed and tumbled down the steps head first. Simon turned and ran back down, narrowly avoiding being hit by Frank's body. His heart stopped and neck broken. Frank's corpse flopped onto the cellar floor with a loud thud. Simon stared at his colleague, barely able to comprehend the fact he had died in a matter of seconds. Delilah looked at the corpse emotionlessly before becoming distressed and making whining noises. Simon walked over to the machine and attempted to comfort her.
Shh,
he said.
Calm down, honey.
Delilah sent out an electric shock to back Simon off.
Fix it.
She hissed.
What?
Said Simon.
Fix it. Get him out of here. Get him out.
Simon stammered while nervously obeying her. He ran over to the body and knelt down. He looked up to the top of the stairs and saw Todd staring down at him. The young man was still unbalanced from the copious amounts of alcohol.
What have you done?
Simon yelled.
He was going to stop you,
said Todd.
I couldn't let him, I couldn't!
Todd began to break down crying, clutching the wall and sliding down. He took a seat on the top of the steps and put his head into his hands. Simon rolled his eyes and sighed.
What a terrible mess I've made, Dr. Morgan!
Todd cried.
How do I fix this? Tell me!
We take his body into the garage, said Simon.
You need to come and help me. What do we do with him there? Stick him in the freezer.
Okay.
Don't leave me.
Delilah whimpered.
You can't leave me. You have to stay here. You must stay here. I need to be monitored.
I'll be right back, Delilah,
said Simon.
We just have to take care of this, okay?
You have to return. You must come back. Come back to me. Please. Don't be long.
Both men struggled but successfully managed to get the corpse upstairs and into the garage, all while Delilah silently mumbled to herself, begging not to be left alone in the darkness again. The garage was a messy, disorganised and neglected space with various boxes, a beer fridge, a washing machine, a dryer, and the very same damaged motorcycle that killed Delilah perched up amongst some garbage bags, with other motorcycle parts dismantled and left lying around as if in a scrapyard. In the corner was an old, worn-out rug, badly affected by moth bites and drink spillage. In another corner, a prior failed experiment, composed of bike parts and blank flesh. Simon opened the door before helping Todd carry Frank's body wrapped up in a tarp, leading him towards the rug. "Put him down," said Simon before Todd released his grip on Frank's back, causing the body to fall and hit its head hard on the ground. "Gently."
"Forgive me, Simon,"
said Todd.
I mean, Mr. Morgan.
"Just call me Simon."
Todd.
Simon flipped up the rug, revealing the outline of a hatch with a handle embedded into it. He grabbed the handle and lifted it up, revealing a built-in freezer full of ice bags and meat in vacuum-sealed bags. We just need to take the meat and the ice out, shove him in, and bury him," said Simon.
"I'd say you've done this before, Simon,"
said Todd. "What?"
"It's a very interesting place for a freezer, you must admit."
Simon paused, initially unsure of how to respond. "It's out of the way and it keeps you fit having to lift and put down a heavy lid every now and then," he said. "Any more questions?"
"No, Simon. Thank you."
Simon ordered Todd to continue as he reached down and took the meat out of the freezer to make room for Frank's corpse. Once they had finished burying the corpse, Simon took Todd into the kitchen. Simon washed his frozen meat-smelling hands while Todd sat at the table and shook uncontrollably as he drank a cup of tea. "When is your uncle coming back?" said Simon.
"Not until I call him," said Todd. "I told him to tell Mother I wouldn't be back home for a few days. I thought we could work together. I thought it would all go well. We could just stay up and work. Test it. Test her."
Delilah's unusual noises in the cellar immediately caught Simon's attention. He marched towards the hallway, but was stopped by Todd jumping up and grabbing him by the shoulders.
"Let go!"
said Simon.
"We can't get away with this, can we?"
said Todd.
"We? I didn't kill the man, I'm covering up for you! This work is too important to let anything ruin it! You keep your mouth shut and keep a low profile after this!"
Oh, but can I do anything to help?
"Anything!"
Just keep quiet.
"Sit down!"
Simon shoved Todd off and pointed at the dining table.
"And don't drink anything that has even 1% of alcohol inside."
While Todd slowly sat at the table and continued to drink his tea, Simon returned to the cellar and slammed the door shut. He reached the bottom of the steps and looked at the desk. He sighed at the sight of his destroyed equipment before looking at his computer wife, continuing to make noises while its face showed discomfort.
"Delilah?"
said Simon.
Simon,
She said.
make it stop. I feel so uncomfortable. I can't be uncomfortable. I can't. I won't. It's horrible.
I just need some more time. You damaged my equipment, dear, so I need to...
You need to hurry. Stabilize me. Bring me pleasure. I demand it. You have to work. You have to make me comfortable. Make me more human. Give me life.
I will. I'll do it now, okay? See? Simon moved away to the shelf, grabbing the spare chemicals and equipment he needed. He went back and forth between his desk and the shelves, eventually restoring his lab as much as possible. Despite the mess, Simon immediately began to work on the next formula.